All right, see, I'm Professor again. I'm not going to get away from this tonight. Once I discovered that I can live vlog, it's a lot easier for me than vlogging and having to upload for a few days. It helps me keep on top of events, for one thing, but also in terms of the understandings that I'm beginning to get about the Hiawatha impact. So, in the course of looking through things, came across Randall Carlson's video about the 12,900, a near extinction of humanity, and all the species that disappeared, which falls in the category of the monster spoken of in the Book of Giants, which is my opinion of that. You know, the giant beast, the bear that was bigger than a moose. Yeah, all that stuff. You know, including a lion the size of a bear. You know, or whatever the size it was buried in the examples he brought up. He brought up a lot of interesting stuff, but it got me thinking because he thought I was about the 20-minute mark on it, and then I wound up losing the video. I was going to listen to the rest of it. It was almost done, and it hasn't at the point yet where the Hiawatha impact was known while he was writing about when he was doing this video. I guess it must be a few years old, because I'm sure he knows about it now because there's other videos saying it was his meteor that was found by the Danes. But the Danes had already found it and had it in their National Institute in Copenhagen without knowing what the hell it was. Oh, I mean, they knew what it was. They knew it was a meteorite, but they didn't know it was that meteorite. That meteorite. And I'm speaking of the one that devastated the world in 12,800. Now, he has the date of 12,800, so I guess his chronology is coming from geologists, but this has also been determined now. 12,800 date is somehow determined by, it's not from the Colburn, it's the data, you know, that they have. That's the data and all the glaciological data that I'm sure Carlson did not have access to yet. Got something on my screen here, it's gross. What was I eating? Well, I had leeks with potatoes, and I had all kinds of peanuts, walnuts, and pumpkin seeds and stuff, and chili. I'm a pretty good little vegetarian cook once I get started here. So anyways, we're back on the Colburn again, because the Colburn is something that I'm sure Carlson has become familiar with. Mr. Carlson, you're probably watching this eventually. I've been listening to it closely, listening to it and knowing what happened. And so the Hiawatha impact, because his video was focusing on the Missoula floods, which is, of course, the great revelation of the Pacific Northwest. It's when the Lake Missoula let go and ravaged what's called the Channeled Scablands, which is the interior of Washington and parts of Oregon, and left this landscape that can only have been created by a gigantic flow of water. Like, look at my eyes. Right, and he provided for me in his video the data that I was wondering about in my previous vlogs, about what the 12,800 prior sea level was. Now, he said it was 400 feet it came up by. It's not clear whether that's also including the 100 and 200 meters it came up by in 6,000 BC. But I have, of course, as my observations, that there appears to be, as evinced by the Colburn and other sources, that there were two comets. Well, one was a meteor that was the Hiawatha, the other one, and then froze the world and wiped out whole species and almost wiped us out. And probably wiped out a lot of our Neanderthal kin, although they survived after the Ice Age with them in Europe. You know, we are parts of, they're in us. You know, there was another more kind of species that did not breed, according to the Colburn, did not breed successfully, that passed away, you know. And there's stories about a prior world before, I guess, before the cataclysm of 12,800 BC. I think the date is they have, I don't know whether BC or BP, but 12,800 BC is slightly different. Before present, you know, it's not exactly 2,000 years, you know, 2,300 is, anyway. So, but if that happened in the Pacific Northwest, you know, and Lake Agassiz did what it did in 6,000 BC, 5,000 years later. So that's my premise for there being a second blast of energy to melt the Laurentian ice sheet, because the Hiawatha impact would have destabilized the Laurentian ice sheet and certainly caused maybe the heat that melted Lake Missoula, which that little piece just fell into place for me. Something melted Lake Missoula, so what the hell was it? Same thing that melted Lake Agassiz. except it happened earlier. So that Hiawatha impact, it would have an impact also on the original thing. So how much does C come up by? And then, I don't know the difference between I'm interested in the difference between the C differential between the 12,800 impact and the 6,000 BC impact. Or I think the impact was not an impact, but a graze by a hot comet, and it did change the climate and everything, and it did flood the world and cause things, but it didn't impact, and it wasn't accompanied by great earthquakes in the same way that 12,900 was. Now, the other thing about Hiawatha impact that hit me while I was watching Carlson's video and thinking about the channel scablands, what caused the European ice cap, which was linked by sea with the Hiawatha impact. So the whole Arctic ice cap, the whole Arctic Ocean ice cap was vaporized. It was just in Carlson's video. He comments that, the ice cap centered on Greenland, so the Laurentian ice sheet, which included Greenland. His map doesn't show it that way, but it did. And there was a dam across the Davis Strait, between Davis Strait and the southern tip of Greenland, and then the Hiawatha Peninsula, which is Quebec and Labrador. So all that area turned liquid. But it turned, when that first Hiawatha impact hit, that didn't hit that part of the ice. It destabilized it enough to, and heated up, I guess, like, I'm just speculating on what came in there at 12,900. There appeared to maybe were other fireballs. And maybe Lake Agassiz took a few thousand years to build to the size it did before it released. That's a possibility too from that first thing. But then, the world froze again because of the high albedo from all the rain that resulted from the vaporization of the Arctic ice cap and the parts of the Arctic Ocean would have been vaporized, 300 million tons of ice. But what about the ocean itself? Well, anyways, we have this really ragged landscape, don't we? Really super ragged landscape that is the channeled scablands of the Columbia Basin. Tremendous stuff. Amazing. You talk about Niagara's. I hear everybody's comparing things to Niagara's all the time. No, we have higher falls into that in BC and bigger ones too. Anyways, it's just because they're close to New York and provide New York their power, and they're kind of spectacular, but I've seen bigger, So anyway, they are bigger in the world, but they were much bigger when the ice ages ended. And what ended the ice ages was the meteor impact of the Hiawatha object, right? The Hiawatha object and its companions, the Missoula Lake, Lake Missoula and whatever else, and started the Lake Agassiz process. And then there was another one that's recorded in the Colburn and other writings by other cultures. I'm sure we'll look at it's in the Mahabharata if I go looking for it. I will do that. And all that stuff. The world has to integrate all its history and understand that everything was happening everywhere at once. And yes, in 12,800, it happened to everybody at once. And the same in 6,000 BC, it happened to everybody at once. It wiped out a whole species. It wiped out some of our related species and kin. Millions of people must have been. That first 400 feet that the sea came up by, which is 130 meters roughly, 125 meters. It came up by 125 meters, and then in 6,000 BC, it came up by 200 more when Lake Agassiz let go. So far, we haven't had a comet graze Antarctica. That's all I can say. People realize, that it's not just about earthquakes and storms and our own climate. It's about space. We live in a cosmic bowling alley. We've been hit before many times. And when you stop to think about it, the difference between 12,800 BC and 6,000 BC is only 6,800 years. And we're only 6,218 years. He says, looking at this guy. Is the sky falling? Well, we don't see anything coming right now. Doesn't mean that when we see something coming, we'll be able to do damn anything about it. So this is the reality that the history of our world has been revealed, and also these ancient books that are thought to be disputed and now kind of corroborated with the geological evidence and the geoastronomical evidence that's emerging. Because I maintain that the Colburn constitutes, now we now have geological proof validating Colburn, whatever its provenance. And whenever the claims made to it by a lot of the crazy people I've seen with videos about it, right, with what's in it. But in terms of documentary and graphical evidence of the geological record and the historical record of mankind, like other writings like the Mahabharata and the Lost Books of Book of Barasis and whoever else was known in things that I've heard of that were lost. I could start naming things, libraries that were destroyed and things, what must have existed, what may yet exist in the lands of Iran or deep under Egypt, or in those scrolls in Greece and Herculaneum in Athens and Herculaneum and whoever else knows what gets found yet. You see, there's still things being found all the time. And there's things in India that have just never been translated. Things in India they just don't bother telling us, because they're their own world, India, and they are the oldest civilization. And people think India is primitive. Oh no, India isn't. Despite the caste system and the nastiness of the way that it's going with Indian nationalism, what it can do. Hinduism is a beautiful thing, but God has many faces, so they go right, but they have a very high philosophy and a huge, vast literature that goes back centuries. And much of it in the south and up in the Himalayas, it survived despite the Muslim conquest. And even the Muslim conquest, the literature is extremely rich. India is a very complicated place, much underestimated by the West, just like they underestimated China. See that look in my eye? They underestimated China. They underestimated India too. Anyways, it's because of the ancient past. I see the modern world in the eyes of someone from the ancient past. I've seen it all. That's how I feel. I feel like someone that old from all the things I've read and known, come to know and understand. And I know that sounds like an idle boast. It's not. I'm just being frank. It's really like being a time traveler. You are as you get older in this world because of future shock. You're a time traveler. Every year, you're moving into a new century right now. It's hard. Can't imagine what that was like for my parents. Born 1906, 1921. Everything they saw in their time. I don't know everything I'll see in my time, but I know a lot of the things that I will see in my time because I've seen the things that I already knew I would see coming to pass. Whether it's in politics or the state of the environment and industry and where the planet is going and the state of the moral order. I'm no sinner. I'm not by any means a virtuous man in any kind of moral respect of what other people would consider moral, I guess, in many ways, right? I'm still a highly intelligent man. I know everything about a lot of things in a way that few people know it. It's like a transdisciplinary knowledge of many fields. And when it comes down to events and things like geology and ancient history, it helps to have all the different economic and ecological and technological states involved. Also, in the case of the ancient world, knowledge of all the mythological literatures. Mythological does not mean they're fairy tales. That means that the history as people understood it at the time, and there were our ancestors, and we should listen to them. Because they're telling us stories that we listen to, and when a rare document shows up, and remember the Romans destroyed so much, so did the Muslims, and the Roman churches, including the Orthodox Church, burned very much. They destroyed much of the knowledge of the ancient world during the conversion. And then the great collapse of the great years of darkness when Krakatoa erupted and sundered both Sumatra and Java into two islands and darkened the world for 3 years. That ended the classical world. It ended knowledge of ancient times, and only some of the Muslims spared some of the ancient world. Just Plato and Aristotle and mathematics and Euclid and stuff like that, Pythagoras. And other things, certain things, but not the corpus of there was never, not that I know of, there was no Arabic translation of the Iliad or the Odyssey, for example, or Livy or any of that stuff, the Roman stuff. No, they're not going to translate Catullus, Sappho in Arabic. No, that'd be interesting though, because I don't know if people know who is listening to Sappho, and Sappho was a Greek poetess who both her and Catullus, who was a Roman poetess, their poetry, I guess you might use the polite term lascivious. Catullus is a porn comic, and I come across other things like that too, like the Locusena, which Dr. Jackson Crawford at the University of Colorado, his video on Locusena was very interesting. It was Loki insulting all the gods, and it was all and it was like ripe, and it reminded me of Boccaccio's Decameron, which is all these stories told young nobles in their sermons while they're hiding out for the plague near Florence somewhere in a villa. And it's all these stories they tell of all fortune and love and fate and loss and all this. And yeah, it's great stuff, but it's all carnal. A lot of it's carnal. But more than ever, because we always think of the past as all being uptight and righteous because we were raised in the Victorian era and the post-Protestant era, right? We weren't raised in the middle of the Baroque period, that's for sure, and like impact. I know too much for my own good, dumb good. It's one of my sayings also is keep your eyes on the lie. Keep your eyes on the lies. Like when you're watching the news today, when you're watching about the war, Wet'suwet'en War against Get Them Done and the Wet'suwet'en by the paramilitary force of Canada, which goes on lands where the Crown has no treaty. Yeah, remember that while you're listening, and remember who you're listening to. The CBC is public propaganda. The CTV is corporate propaganda. There is no independent media in broadcast media in Canada unless the Unistone and Get Them Done. They generally have their own independent media, and I bet they have a satellite uplink. I sure hope they do. I sure hope they thought of that. And I don't know. There's going to be a battle in the woods if the Mounties are stupid enough to try and advance. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Mohawk warriors show up. But there's lots of Secwepemc and Dakak warriors and Wet'suwet'en warriors and Gitxsan and Tsimshian warriors. This is what didn't happen with the Northern Gateway. This was the war that didn't happen, which was why the Northern Gateway didn't happen. But here's Corgan. He wants to build that damn Kitimat LNG plant, all them juicy union jobs again, and to keep China happy because China has this treaty Sharp is signed. It says, well, we have some shares in this, so you have to use any means necessary to make it happen. Well, neither China nor Canada has treaties with Britain. So this now becomes a matter for the international court. So like I said, keep your eyes on the lies. Remember that all the big media, including the CBC, they're all lies. And I find the NPR in the U.S. very muted. They don't cover Canadian news, for one thing, which they don't have to, the responsibility to do, but it does affect America quite a bit, and American involvement in Canada is quite intense, both covert and overt, in various ways, private and public. It's very, very present here. Of course, we have American assets here, operating for American shelters, either Canadians here or Americans up here. A lot of the Americans here are exiled Americans, and I would like to see more American, liberal Americans come up here. The people who need to get out of Trumpism before they lose their lives are welcome to come to Canada, as far as I'm concerned, or try to. Unfortunately, our young prime minister, so he pretends to be a young person. He's not really. He's the same age as the other guy. But he's not like his father. His father took in the Vietnam War resistors. He made no sign of that. He does let in the people crossing the border, losing their hands and fingers and noses in the cold. That's how bad it is. That's how badly people need to get out of the United States. We need to lift the third-party agreement as it applies to the United States and recognize it's not a safe country. But we're facing a tide of immigration from there anyway, with the environmental crisis that's coming in the coming decades. As the U.S. gets too damn hot and gets on fire, turns into a dust bowl, and begins to flood from all the stuff that's too close to sea level for its own good. And they're talking about, 1 2 raise by a century. It's going to come faster than that, folks. The times that it's come up for, it's come up really fast. And there's things that could right now that could make it come up really fast. I've explained it in my other vlogs. So, anyways, back to the Colburn and the Hiawatha impact and its successor. There's a name for it in the Colburn. I can't remember what it was, but it was like a flying thing with a tail and 2 wings. It was a roar, and it just passed by, I guess, but it melted something, and the sea came up and back down. So that was this thing that melted Lake Agassiz and caused the Davis Lake ice dam to break. It must have weakened the Davis Lake ice dam, which would have bridged between Ungava. And likewise, now I'll get back to my point about the Channel Scablands now, about what had occurred to me, about where the Hiawatha impact is. Now, the landscape around there's kind of been leveled. You see that the granite, the bedrock there, I've seen the map of it. I'm making this gesture with my hand, like this here in my head, It's kind of been flattened around there. You can see that other than the impact crater, right? But there was a lot of things got wiped, right? But the wave that would have been produced on the shore of the liquefied Arctic Ocean would have done 2 really big things. Other than going up into the air as cloud and causing the planet's temperature to drop as it was turned to heavy rain for a long time, after put out the fires that had been caused by the explosion, which burned probably most of the northern hemisphere, and I'd predict, I guess, probably quite a bit of Siberia. I don't know what the evidence is there, but that would have been wiped out maybe by the younger dry ice. The ice came back shortly, for a short while, because of the increased albedo and the quickly dropping temperature. And then that withdrew very quickly again because of that second impact. in 6,000. No, grazed by. It was grazed by in 6,000 BC. Now, in the context of the Velikovsky information I was saying earlier, Velikovsky has some dates on what he was saying. And it had to do with records and mythographic records too, I think, right? And I don't know, like I say, somebody out there who might know the Yugas better than I do, and the Hindu history of the Mahabharata, if you know that, please comment what the time frames are and how they fit. And the clear mention of the Kolbrin that I've found, listening to it, of the flooding of the Black Sea Basin and of the lowlands everywhere and the cities on the shores or cultures on the shores, and untold numbers of people. It's huge. But given what the Hiawatha impact is, and that the ice cap would have been also over Spitsbergen and all that linked up, that all linked up. The Arctic and North Atlantic ice cap, or the North Atlantic ice bridge to Scandinavia, was all the Scandinavian ice cap and the European ice cap linked. Were they linked at the time of the Hiawatha impact? Maybe. I don't know the actual details of the size of the ice cap at that point, but probably. Because once ice has a lock on that scale on a hemisphere, it's not going to let go very readily until something comes along with it. As Carlson video explains, the amount of energy needed to melt all that ice cap would be like 5,000 years of maximum melt rate from a natural process, and whatever he compared it to, all at once. All at once came down out of space, Randall Carlson. You figured that out by now, and later on it's been Randall Carlson's media. Okay, I don't mind. Fine. I'm using your name to get people to listen to this too, not because I want them to listen, but I want you to listen, please, sir. So the wave that would have come out of northern Greenland, how big would it have been? Do you think about this coastline of northern Iceland, and you think about the coastline of Spitsbergen, and you think about the coastline of Scandinavia and the rugged cliffs of Scotland and Western Ireland, and you tell yourself that only regular sea erosion did that? No, then you got to ask yourself what was there before, what Rocky Mountains were wiped away, what by the size of the wave in 12,900. Yes, it was ice, as far south as, where Scotland came down. So the ice got vaporized, but then this wave came and tore those rocks. Because those are not glacial rocks in Scotland in the Hebrides. Those aren't scoured rocks. They are exposed at a small scale, but not on the ice cap level. Same with, Norway. Their fjords are very deep, right? But what was washed them out so quickly? And it's not that the ice went. Sometimes you have things like the Prekestola, which are like torn from the land, right? There's rips in the land. So anyways, I don't know the geology of my ancestral country very well, but I know what it looks like, right? And it has me wondering now, because of this, we know that there was a heat wave when the Davis Lake ice dam let go, because it probably let go all at once, or within Doggerland faced a huge wave. It didn't just come up slowly. It came up like at least a foot an hour if it didn't come at you as a 20, 30, 40, 50 mile an hour wall of water. It could have come either way. I'm not quite sure if they know how the Doggerland flood took place. The flood that drowned Lyonesse and Avalon, the flood that drowned Black Sea, the flood that drowned Gilman and Dwarka, the flood that drowned whatever's in the bottom of the Gulf of Thailand. We don't know, we just don't know what's down there. But we know there's got to be things down there. But what was down there before that 12,800 year and the 125 meter thing came up too? There's a lower sea level yet. So there's a couple of floods, but the world was destroyed by fire. Amazes me of the old E. Cummings world. Some say the world will end in fire, some say ice. I would think that ice would be nice and would suffice. It's a famous little old poem. Anyways, it was destroyed by fire, and then it was destroyed by water. And the Popol Vuh has been validated, right? And I'm sure if we had to look around, everything else you could think of, and the stories, I think there's various stories, not just the Hopi. Hopi also has a story of the world destroyed by fire and flood. And there's others, South American and Central American, I think African peoples too, all over the world, the story not just of the flood, but of the world destroyed by fire, and where there was grassland, there is now desert, and where there was savanna, there was jungle, and so on, and there was up in the north, there were these vast forests, and massive, massive beasts of all kinds, so big that you wouldn't want to be a human on this continent, really. You There were, but they must have been really brave humans, because if you were living south of the ice cap in North America, you'd be facing, lions the size of large bears, saber-tooths the size of small horses, camels the size of small elephants, and mean ones, and giant beavers, mean ones, giant sloths. They still have them in South America. They think when the explorers came in there, and the Portuguese and stuff, and there's bones for them. But in North America, the La Brea tar pits is where you find the saber-tooths, except for one thing. There's a story from the Chilcotin War of a thing that came down off the ice cap and tore bodies out of the ice. I never had cat eating carrion before, but it was hungry, I guess. And there's a story from the crossing of the Malaspina Glacier in Alaska that people were trying to get to the Klondike over the top of the big ice field over where Mount Killarney and Mount St. Elias is and all the Killarney ice fields and all that. They thought they were going to come down into the northeast. They took the wrong glacier coming out of the ice field. They went down the Tenaya, which led them in the wrong direction towards Fairbanks. But when they were up there was this thing that would leap up out of the glacier and grab people out of the crevasses and grab people screaming as they were being eaten. That's in Pierre Burton's Klondike. It's where Rainbow's at, right? And anyway, there's all kinds of stories. I won't get into the Kushtaka stories of the otter men who are like the Sasquatch, but something different. But the sounds of the Sasquatch that have been heard in Terrace and Morristown, which is what was heard in Terrace and Morristown. Let's be frank. Whatever they were saying, the one I think was a call, like a call to assembly, or trying to find another one. It's a big country and there's not many of them, and they're trying to find each other across a landscape that's been made industrial logging wilderness and kept from the public, because there is a Sasquatch Protection Act in British Columbia, by the way, now world. I did see a BC Forest Service notice, I guess, required by the act, saying that, if you meet a Sasquatch, leave it alone, don't feed it, don't bother it, leave it alone, it's not going to eat you, and just leave it alone. So there is no Sasquatch protected area yet, but there is legislation that has required the Forest Service to put up this notice, because they've been being heard, and they've been damaged equipment. This is their country, and we've come to it, and we've cut it and burned and paved it. And now we want to build a pipeline across it. Do you think that only the Unistoten and the Gedem are in the way of the pipeline? I know that sounds even crazier than anything else I've said, but honestly, do you think that only the humans and not the ancients that have lived here since ancient times before the human came and have survived the volcanoes and the ice ages and lived on the ice? In the ice. Do you not think the giants would be in the way of this also? The giants are gone. Oh, foolish mortals. So foolish. So foolish. How could you be so foolish? To think that something is immortal would ever pass from this world. So foolish. So awfully foolish. So anyways, you watch what you do out in the woods there, boys. Okay, I'm speaking to the Mounties and the military. You got serious creatures to deal with. We got more to deal with than free Putin. The pipeline will be doomed to sabotage of the most devastating kind. Not in a way that will harm the land, but that will harm the pipeline and its workers. Because the magic of the land up there is powerful, not because of the natives and not because I'm a crazy man, but because of the available evidence of history and nature and what I know about the stories about the children of the earth and sky, that they are longer lived than us and know more than we do. Me, I'm just a big human. But I read a lot. I see a lot. I'm the professor who knows a lot about esoteric things, and I'm willing to give credence to a lot of things, but always to consider the rational conclusions that follow on things' existence, such as the existence of my brothers in the mountains, sisters, who are reputed to dance on a mountaintop near Agassiz every year. What few of them are left, probably, but they don't like us. They don't like white men at all. They don't like humans in general. Anyways, I've gotten off on the Sasquatch, but in their first planet, they watched a lot happen, because they were probably around when all this happened with the impacts, right? They survived that. So they're older. They know the older civilization. At least us then, too. And there are ruins that go back 25, 30,000 years. So there was something before the Hiawatha impact. So as much as I used to look at Graham Hancock's books, and the thing is, they have this tendency to talk about ancient aliens. No. We just have to talk about ancient Earth. ancient Earth, and what was capable of the humans as travels through space-time. No, that requires magic. That requires physical laws of physics that we know. And yes, of course, Star Trek has made, magical things come in practical reality, but in the process, we've destroyed the planet, creating them to do them. And someone had commented one science fiction story I read somewhere, was it science actually, that the amount of energy, no, it was a science article in like Scientific American or something like that, or science, that the amount of energy needed to propel a large ship, say 4 million light years or something like that at such and so a speed, would require all the energy that all the Earth, if you took E equals mc squared and used mass of the Earth as the E equals mc squared, that's the amount of energy needed. You would need all the energy of the matter of the planet Earth to travel effectively across space at any kind of what we would call speed. But you have to get rid of, if you want to travel through time space, you better stop thinking in terms of speed. Speed is a linear concept. Space is locational, it's conceptual. If there's ever a time away through space-time and little spaceships and stuff like that, no, those are dimensional ships, if they are. If there's technology to do that. But right now, we haven't even moved into air technology. We're still building road systems, and with the system, everything that's destroying our own breathing atmosphere and our water and air. We've been knowing this since I was a kid, since the 1960s. And the publication of Silent Spring and the first smart alerts in LA. We've known this all this time, and what have we done? We've made it worse and worse and worse, and just gone to the mall and kept on buying cars and kept on buying clothes, and kept on taking rights from native people and poor people, and let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's because the rich don't care. The rich know what's coming. The really good ones, the real top two, they know what's coming. We're just all collateral damage. All in the balance books to them. I see it. But it's all balance books with them too, as far as the nature goes, nature being God, God being creation, us being part of creation, and we're part of creation that is now destroying our role in it. And so we shall be destroyed by our own hand. Because that's what's happening when the sea comes up. It's us that did that. And when the methane kills us all, either by temperature or by poisoning the atmosphere, and when there's no more fish in the sea, we did that. When the fire burns you, when the fires come down out of the mountains and burn your city, or the sky opens up with flame, when the methane burns. You did that. You did that going to the mall and not giving a shit. That's why I make these vlogs, right? I want to snap people into a reality. It talks about a lot of, you go all over the map, don't I? See politics and what's to it in war, but it all comes back down to things like the reality of what we know, looking at the Hiawatha impact and realizing, say from Randall Carlson's video, who I know by now realizes that, yeah, that was a meteor, of course, it did what it did. But the Missoula floods wasn't the only devastation that was resulting from the Hiawatha impact. It tore apart the European ice cap and devastated the coastal Norway and stuff, and of course it would have washed over Northern Europe also. And then, the story of the creation in Volaspol, which means what the Sibyl said, what the Vola said. A Vola is a seeress of the giant tribe, who Odin asks the future of. I think she's actually called us from the field of the dead. It actually is where she is. She's on the field of hell in my setting of it, and my thought about it. And she's always taunting, do you really want more? She's going. And then she tells him his own doom. Will you do more? She tells him it's worse. She tells him no more. But in the story, it's told that the father of all giants was melted out of the ice by a giant cow, Alhumla. And Dr. Crawford has a longer explanation of that, which I appreciated hearing about. That's Dr. Jackson Crawford, University of Colorado. Appreciated hearing about it. Alhumla was licked out. He's licked out of the ice by Alhumla the cow, and then from his underneath his armpits, however it works, all the tribe of giants is born, and one of those giants is Bor, who is Odin's father. And anyway, there are different. The gods and the giants are not that much different. Anyway, but what I saw there was the story of the beginning of the pasture lands around the Baltic Sea, with the disappearance of the Baltic ice cap. And if I'm not mistaken, the bottom of the Baltic, never mind the thing that's supposed to be down there, speaking of which, come to think of it, Is it an extraterrestrial or something that's always been there? That got flooded, or that came down? It came down with him. Was there another meteor that is what's at the bottom of the Baltic? But I think the Baltic is a bit like the Black Sea. There's brackish water at the bottom, and it's different than other. It's a landlocked sea. It was meltwater from the Great Scandinavian Ice Cap that once extended down against the Pacific, which is the Polish Czech border, Polish Bohemian border. And yeah, that whole area was, it quickly was flooded by humans when they withdrew. Wherever they came from, it was the Germanic peoples. And the Germanic peoples, they say that Kashgar, that they'd come from Central Asia. They say this in their legends. And the Celts also say that they came from the land of the Four Seas. And there's a connection to Troy in their stories. And the Tuatha De Danann are thought to be the tribe of goddess and they came across the continent. But there are stories that connect the Celtic world to Egypt and to the Punics. Yeah, very definitely to Punics. So the Punic civilization is another epic that was Roman bullshit erased it for us. Thanks, Roman. I really wish that Carthage had a copy of its own library somewhere. Maybe one might get found at New Carthage, which I think is Marbella or Malaga, somewhere there. It's a fascinating world. I'm excited by the things that are coming out in archaeology. I regret not being younger. I regret not having an astrophysics degree. I regret not having a geology degree. I regret not finishing my music degree, though, and not doing a degree in classics also. My mind's too alive on fire to ever settle in one field, so I became the M professor because I believe in I must share the knowledge that I have. Not useless. It's just complicated to understand because it's all complicated. It's all very simple. Everything fits together. All the most obscure stuff that you ever heard, if you listen to it the right way, you realize, oh, that's what he was talking about. Like I said, Lewis Spence's Encyclopedia of the Occult has other sources like the Colburn Institute. Everything should be having a second look at it. The Bible has been too limiting a source in the Western mind. The Romans limited things to the Bible for a reason, people. They wanted you to forget about the past before them. And the Catholic Rome, when they converted, it was even worse. They wanted you to forget about the world that they destroyed. The pagan Romans did it, and then the Christian Romans did it. It's the way they do things. And it's what they're doing up in the edge of it, the frontier, which doesn't have title in Burns Lake and Smithers, on the territory of the sovereign Giksan, Wet'suwet'en nation, the houses of Unistoten, and I don't know how to pronounce it properly, Unistoten. We usually say Unistoten and Gittimden. And I recommend a book called Death Feast at Muhammad about the Giksan Wet'suwet'en Delgamuk case. Delgamukw, Delgamuk. Two W's with a KW on the end. Versus Regina, versus the Queen. Whatever it's titled, whatever the actual title of the case is, but it was a famous legal case. They did win it, but it also allowed for the first time of oral law to be considered common law under Canadian law. And the common law of the Aboriginal rights of the Giksan Wet'suwet'en Confederacy has already been recognized by the court, which means that John Horgan and Pierre Jr. have no right to send troops in. No matter what the hell China wants. We don't care. The Giksan Wet'suwet'en, nor do the people of British Columbia care about the Vladivostok Treaty. We repudiate it, and China can go to hell. It's not right that China gets to decide to override the rights of the Wet'suwet'en Confederacy, the Giksan Wet'suwet'en Confederacy, and the hereditary chiefs of the Giksan on their sovereign territory. I hope the UN censures Canada tomorrow. Yeah, and is our ambassador going to do it? No. Who will? I don't know. Somebody has to. I'll see who I can find. I'm going to do a video on this situation in French for France, for the Gilets jaunes, to put the lie to the Canadian yellow vests who are currently marching on Ottawa to take off Trudeau's head on behalf of the oil industry and building the pipeline and shutting out all them colored people. Racist pricks from Alberta. We don't have a high opinion of Alberta out here in BC. Those of us who don't like the way they regard us. Or the images of those urban cappuccino suckers, which is a term invented by the forest industry. and tree hugger and all the other defamatory terms they came up with for us. Thuggery, political thuggery is these things are done in Canada. It's info thuggery all the time. They will try and demonize Frida Huson and the people for them. Then they will cover this up. They've shut off the media. They've shut out the outside world. This is what Canada does. This is like the meteor of truth hitting home right now. Because I see history. I see history on a large scale. I see what Canada is and where we are. I see that these sovereign nations here are occupied by a squatter state that happens to be occupying by force with its military and the RCMP in the guise of a police force. Well, there's not many military here. Somehow they all showed up in Burns Lake today. What they do, fly in? I don't know. I have to find out. The military operations in Canada are secret. They happen. Same with Gustafson Lake, and even then, while it was happening, it was all secret. Same with Seaton and Oka. After the ultimatum came down and the police took over the media. Police, the military. What's the difference? The military took over CBC News World and shut it down. Young Canadians, hear me on that one. Your national network was taken over by the military during the Oka crisis. It hasn't really changed since. Okay. Busters, I got to remember to tag you or send this to you. Dynamic, vital, important part of it is of our political reality in Canada and how we need to fix it and why we need a digital TNN men. We need a Canadian yellow vest that's a real yellow vest, a real genuine gilet jaune genuine. You know, I'll do it in French. I'm going to do a thing in French on Canadian yellow vests being such frauds and taking the banner of the yellow vest to their own selfish cause. Yeah, it's hard not to get angry. It's not to get angry when you see people that are having police sent in on their lands to build a pipeline to keep union bastards working while other people sleep in the street and the unions don't give one good goddamn shit about them. So yeah, I'm a politician too, but I'd just rather be playing my music. I really would. But between the Hiawatha impact fascinating me right now and me seeing so much ancient history, it's boggling my mind and wanting to find out more about what's in the Colbrand and other sources and think about, well, how about that? How about that? So I've tagged NASA Guard, who did the Hiawatha study, you know, and I'm going to send it to the University of Copenhagen. And I don't have enough time in the day to contact everybody I think about sending the tape. So if you like what you're hearing, please share it. And when the time comes, I am going to run a Patreon. I need help being who I am and having the resources to do this, even with maps and things. And some of what I've narrated, I'm going to maybe redo videos and issue images. So again, later when I have the time. So I have this constant joke, I need 6 inches, more like 16. I need to delegate stuff. I need maps, I need data on that, you know. But also just in the way in terms of fitting in together the information that I have and sharing with you my processing power, as I guess I've used the term in previous videos, a mentat. That I've absorbed so much information and I have the capacity of a truth sayer, like and again, Frank Herbert's the Bene Gesserit. Just absorb information and witness it and not pass judgment on it, except maybe sometimes judgments. I've learned to get past moral judgments on a lot of things. I know that sounds awful, but you have to with history. You can't damn a man like Alexander or the Jan Emperor. They're just doing who they were. You know, you do what you do. It's why you are. We remember the men we remember the great heroes were slaughtered, or they themselves were slaughterers, or popes help us to be a pope, or a high priest, or something like that. What you have to, if it's religion mixed with war. Anyways, so the Hiawatha impact transformed the planet. It transformed our history. Knowing about it now, not just Randall, it doesn't validate just what Randall Carlson's video raised as a scientific truth. Where did all the energy come to melt that ice cap? Well, don't we know now? You know, we do know now, the Hiawatha impact. But think of the size of the wave. So the wave would have done away with a lot more, probably washed away South America too. I wouldn't be surprised to see wave damage South America. Or again, maybe Nova Zemlya or somewhere like that. Whole Russian basin is kind of that flat basin. I don't know about the northern Urals or anything like that. If there's any mountains along the Arctic Ocean of Russia, I don't think so. But signs of wave there. I don't know. It just strikes me that massive impact not only would have started huge forest fires, which they found the layer of carbon, with the layer that Randall Carlson has, and the iridium and all that stuff, the osmium, which indicates planetary impact. So there were two impacts, or impact and a graze by. We have a cosmic history in the Holocene, but our history has now been extended back to 12,800 BC in documentary form, because the Colburn is a memory of those times, much more extensive than Genesis or the Enuma-Elish. And I suspect that the lost history of Berossus and 100,000 years of history is going to have the histories of Giraffe and the lost cities of the Black Sea Basin, which must be down there, given that Giraffe was, 8,500, and there's a city, and a big cigarette. Well, it's a lot like nobody was going to be living down in the Black Sea Basin or in the bottom of the Aegean and stuff. People just haven't been diving deep enough. So I don't know if there's hydrographic Google Earth. I don't know. I'm going to look around and see if I can find something with a seafloor. Just have a look, poke around. Have a look in Hudson Bay. I think if it's a comet grazed by, because I've begun to surmise since that there wasn't other impact. I guess I'm completely wrong about Hudson's Bay and Ungava being impact sites, but there is that one scoop. It's an older one on the west side of Northwest. But yeah, the whole point is we are constantly being bombarded from outer space. It's not just geotectonics and organic climate change that affects us. It's impacts. Time and again and again and again and again and again and again. How many impacts since the beginning? Well, as somebody said in one of the videos, you look at the surface of the moon, that'll give you an idea how often things get hit. So what happened to the moon during all this? Well, the Colburn says it was gone after the fire thing, and then somehow it was back again by the time of the other flood, because it's moon stand and the moon is in another passage the moon is mentioned again. It's all fascinating. It's all fascinating. So I know so much about their mythologies, that the idea that there's something astronomical to these, that what had happened had spun the moon out of the place, and it sounded like it had changed the rotation of the planet also. That they said that the northern hemisphere was stood on its side. And I think they meant the sky was turned on its side. Was it only temporary? Like wobble it out, just change it. I don't know, but so there's no record of variance in the precession of that magnitude. But a jolt from a meteor would definitely knock the planet around. It would affect where the moon went. Maybe the moon orbited out and back around Mars and did something weird. There's this story about Velikovsky has about why Venus spins in the opposite direction. So the legitimate scientists don't look at Velikovsky. Maybe they are now. They should be, maybe. I don't know. I haven't read in years. I didn't understand it all the time. Oh, this is Russian pseudoscience is what I thought. Apparently not. Right? A lot of Russian science that we discredit, we don't listen to, including the writings about Tibet. I don't want to say Novichok. That's not it. There's a guy. Was a guy that went to the Ladakh, the monastery that has a record of Jesus coming there, and translated. It starts with N. His name. Anyways, there's a lot on the Russian side that we have kept from the Western mind, the same way we've not been integrated with the Chinese mind or the Indian mind, or the Islamic and Persian mind, the world of those cultures, because of our religious biases that have been attached to the Enlightenment. The Christian biases attached to the Enlightenment have hampered, this is the foundation of basically science, physical science, but there's allowed engineering to happen and ruin the planet. And build, consumer cars and convince us all to use cars and use up all this fuel and don't care about poisoning the earth. So let's make plastics and don't care about poisoning the plastics, man, we're a stupid race, eh? I mean, geez, we have you stupid. I mean, well, maybe we're actually really smart. We just know that it's time to get off the planet, so we got to make it as ugly as we can before we go. But it's not ugly in the future. Somebody else is going to be fascinated by all this layer of plastic they find. Maybe something come along that eats plastic. There are already bacteria maybe that bacteria that's eating plastic will evolve into our successor species. And maybe, just maybe, a few humans will survive the coming cataclysms of the next century, and it will be the next century, not the next 5 centuries. And maybe the next decades. I get the sense it's the next decades. That the cataclysm will come, the melting of Greenland is going to happen a lot faster than we're expecting. And it will be similar again. It will cause the ice falls and stuff. There were huge waves. There'll be other things that happen because of it, and the climate, further climate aspects of climate change we hadn't anticipated. And we better come up with a way to deal with all the methane that's going to, if we don't burn it off, it's going to release and do its own thing. No, we got to tap that energy somehow, but we got to come up with a useful thing to do with it, you know? And we don't know enough about this planet to tamper with anything. That's what we're learning. We're like far beyond. This is what Faust in the Randall Jarrell, uh, uh, which I recommend. I think was it this video or the previous one? The Randall Jarrell's edition one of book one of Goethe's Faust. That he tries to tame the world and overwhelms him. That he doesn't have the technical capacity. And this also applies once he tries to use the last gifts that Mephistopheles gave him, which is all the engineering and dams and power. And all it does is destroy creation and then destroy him, as well as the woman he loved. And that's kind of what I didn't read all of Faust. You know, I just read Randall Jarrell's translation, which is very beautiful, and I recommend it. Good God, I'm already at 52 minutes. I had to do like 20 minutes. So NASA Goddard, I hope you're listening to me, because I'm not saying I'm apply for a job, you know, but if somebody there is listening to what they like, I'm just not, never pursued the scientific training that I should have to be working for you or NOAA or anybody else like that, but I should be, you know, but I don't know, too principled to be in the military, and I was just not disciplined enough to be a scientist and more interested in the fantastic than the logical. But I'm an artist. My mind works as an artist, and it synthesizes things, and synthesizes all the knowledge I've ever heard. And I don't immediately discredit something unless it's noxious bullshit, you know, like the bullshit coming out of the Canadian Yellow Vests. Les Gilets jaunes de France, après la prochaine, je ferai une vidéo pour la France, pour les choix de situation, le district Beaucly, la région Beaucly, les fleuves Beaucly, on nordwest of the Colombie-Britannique. So I'm going to sign off. That's my little salutation. I just said in French. I'm going to do a little video and that. So I'm going to start also doing in French. I don't think I can do this stuff with the Hiawatha here in French, though. The Hiawatha impact in French. I'm not ready yet, but I am ready to talk about BC history in French and current BC politics. So I'm the unprofessor. I'm going to sign off. I didn't mean to go on this long, this late at night, but I enjoy doing this a little too much, I guess. But I'm glad to have an outlet for the things I see, because I see too much to keep it inside. And I have Apollo cursed Cassandra with prophecies no one would believe. All I have is knowings. Science is knowing. You know, the Temple of Apollo inside it at Delphi was a thing about knowledge. The word was E. The word they had, a medical word E. Nobody knows what the word was. I wonder, I don't speak enough Greek to speculate. You know, I wouldn't mind learning ancient Greek, but I'm an old man now. The Lord blesses me with so many more years on this earth, and I have time to learn it. And the situation just in Delphi and be around it all the time. Same is true of Norwegian, Icelandic, or Hindi, or Chinese. You know, wherever I go, I will go somewhere once I'm able to, health-wise, and with your help with the Patreon grant. You know, I want to be able to travel. Even though I have to have a home in Canada, I want to be able to go do some things and important things and play beautiful music, but also, you know, contribute to world knowledge and go to the places I'm talking about, and maybe just maybe find somebody with enough Patreon support to say, hey, look, why don't we go talk to the government of Turkey about going to the Temple of the Seven Planets and trying to find the Library of Hermes Trismegistus. Oh yeah, I could die on that day and be happy. You know, and now I'm taking archaeology, like all the other fields I just mentioned. I started out wanting to be an architect, and I was an admirer of Imhotep, who is, of course, one of the founders of the Masons. So I don't know if any of you Masons hear that. I'm like the same way I'm a rogue Green, I'm a rogue Mason, I'm a Masonic, and I guess you could say it. I've never done your little rituals to getting up your keys and secrets and all that stuff. I don't know any of that stuff, but the knowledge that you guys have, I wish I could know, especially the history of Parassus. But other things like the Colburn, other volumes of the Colburn may show up the Lost Book and the Lost Metal Book or something, and the stuff that was Father Cresby's library that disappeared, although a lot of the gold was just burned, a lot of it was just gold anyway. You know, when it was burned, they just burned it for the gold, and it's in the National Bank. It's been crapped, you know. But there were things in his collection that were really curious and suggesting of a different civilization in Central and Northern South America than you'd want to know about, you know. In South America, we still don't know about. Same as there is a lot in Russia and a lot in Central Asia. A lot hidden in the mountains in Central Asia. Who knows in the jungles of the Amazon? I think Bolsonaro is going to have some surprises, by the way. But yeah, he is worse than Trump. But Brazil is now becoming what? He is maybe the Brazilian Teddy Roosevelt. So if I was another South American nation, I'd be concerned about Brazil attacking them sometime in the next while if Bolsonaro stays in power. Because he won't be done with just his own poor people in the Aboriginals. He's a man with sights on glory and wanting to make Brazil into a great power worldwide. South America's Putin crossed with Trump. And I don't know, I would probably bet that the same way that Putin has got Mr. Trump by the short and curlies, or Mr. Trump, if you just see fine eye to eye, which might even be the better the case, because Trump's just a patsy, everybody we know that. But that Putin and Bolsonaro probably chat quite a bit through the BRIC arrangement, British, Russia, India, China currency arrangement, and all that stuff, the politics to do with that. So Bolsonaro, Putin, Xi, China, Xi is in there. Xi's in Macron. Is what did I hear? China being involved in something in Europe, and it was like, yeah, they sure are. They're involved. And other Canadians and American friends and anybody from another country who listened in. There's a little bit of Canadian history and also stories about the ancient impact of the meteor that did end the world in 2800 BC. And we now have that record documentation. I find it really fascinating that we are now at a new era, suggesting that there's so much more to find. Suggesting that there's so much more yet to find. So how do we find it? Well, we all stop fighting. We all stop fighting, we start looking. Stop fighting, start looking. But right now they're fighting in the north. What are they fighting for? So they can burn something that comes out of the ground that they're bringing out of the ground that's helping to destroy. Well, that's nice light there, isn't it? Oh, that's cool. Oh, I like that. I'm playing with light in the kitchen now. Interesting. So, good night. I'm the Professor Mike Clevin, Big Skookum One. Signing off for the night. It's January 7th, Russian Christmas. I don't know how to say that in Russian. I should have learned by the end of the day. I kept on saying I was going to do it. Good night, my friends.